afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. About a month away from the beginning of training camp for the Browns. Of course, first 8 or so days will be in West Virginia at the Greenbrier. The Browns also announced today there will be 8 training camp days that are open to the public out in Berea, and each of them has a theme this year. So Tuesday, August 1st, it's youth football, flag football. Sunday is a throwback day. Monday, superheroes. The 7th, the 9th, stay in the game. The 20th, Browns backers. 22nd, military appreciation. The 23rd, barks and bites. That is as in dogs. And the 24th, Browns give back, as in their charity work. So 8 dates open to the public for training camp, getting ready for the 2023 season. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage in Quincy. They're going to get things rolling pretty quickly here. It's amazing how quick training camp gets on you out in West Virginia leading up to that Pro Football Hall of Fame game against the Jets.
Yeah, because they get to start a little bit earlier, and I think our whole calendar has been a week early, right? Because we were doing mandatory mini camps a week before everybody else. So Brown season's going to come upon us. It's going to come pretty quick here. The good things for fans with that new schedule is you don't have to, that first day of training camp, a lot of people go, and then a lot of people are always like disappointed because it's not a padded practice and they don't have padded practices until like the 5th or 6th day of camp. Now I think, by the time you get to August 1st, you will be well into the padded era of the Browns practice. So there is a lot to look forward to with this football season. And, as far away as it seems, Dave, we're only 6 weeks away from it really getting going.
I know.
Hang on.
I hear you. Hey, the other thing is, this is a good year to have the Hall of Fame game, so you get the additional preseason game. More importantly is that extra week of practice, because you better start out quickly with the way this schedule opens up. You better be ready to go week 1.
Yeah, 3 division games in your first 4 weeks, and then you have a bye week very early on. I'm wondering if having the Hall of Fame game kind of is a factor on why the Browns had an early bye week. I don't know why it would, because starters don't really play in that, but maybe the extra practice factors in there. But yeah, they're gonna have to get it going early, get some work going. And look, we're gonna focus on Deshaun Watson, obviously, because he's Deshaun Watson. He's one of the most high-profile players on this team. But the extra weeks are really gonna benefit some of the guys who are trying to find themselves, right? Like a DeJuan Jones, a Perion Winfrey, a Siaki Ika. Some of these younger guys who are definitely gonna be able to get snaps in that Hall of Fame game and get the extra snaps in that game. Also, the guys at the edge of the roster that we're trying to see what they're going to be. So David Bell would be somebody who would benefit from this as well. So a lot of room for a lot of guys to benefit. You get an extra Browns preseason game. We get the classic nostalgic 4 weeks of preseason. I know some of you younger people in the audience don't know what that's about. Welcome to my world.
All right. You tweeted this out. So Browns defensive lineman not named Myles Garrett combined for 10 sacks and 46 pressures. That is 9 players. Myles Garrett had 16 sacks, 38 pressures. Garrett and Zadarius Smith combined for 26 sacks, 72 pressures. Garrett, Zadarius, Obo, and Dalvin Tomlinson, 33.5 sacks, 103 pressures. So I guess what you're saying is there's some hope that we might be able to get some pressures and some sacks on opposing quarterbacks this year.
It is reasonable to assume that the team's going to be better. Now, that assumes that, hey, Zadarius is going to recreate his numbers from last year. Ugbo is going to be able to recreate his numbers from last year where he was in a more feature role. Well, not a more feature role, kind of a similar role to what he's going to be in now. So I think that's pretty reasonable. And then Dalvin Tomlinson will be able to recreate his numbers. It doesn't even account for growth, right? That those guys all being next to each other might actually make each other better. But also, I'd like to point out, we noticed the massive difference, right, that the help has made if you just add in the stats from last year to what they had around them this year. Even if you add those stats, the Browns would be at like what, with the DB sacks and the linebacker sacks, around 44, which is in the middle of the league. And this is a point that I keep making. I know we want the Browns because like they're talented enough to be a top 5 defense. We kind of want them to be a top 5 defense, but there's a lot more that goes into being a top 5 defense than talent. And even if you add in all of those numbers for the help that you're going to have around them, that takes you from like 30th in the league to 11th, which is a massive jump that we should be very proud of. But if you're looking at this as if the Browns need to be in that like top 10, top 5 era for you to be happy, then that's where I feel like the expectations might have gotten a little bit too high. But yeah, that's the monumental growth that they're taking just with the help around them. And even with that monumental growth, Dave, they're around the middle of the league in pressures if they add all of that. Like, that's how bad. I don't think people have contextualized how bad that defensive line was around Myles Garrett last year and how much room they have to make up in order to be elite this year.
Yeah, so let's kind of swing that the other way, and I know you've done this on your video entitled Unfiltered. What does all that talent mean for Myles Garrett then? In theory, you would expect him to not get as beat up, as much attention. If you've got other guys around him and you're paying so much attention to Myles Garrett, you got to pick which one you're going to do.
Yeah, and with Myles and how that's going to affect Myles, I think it's a little different than what people assume, because I don't think there is a soul in the universe other than maybe TJ Watt that you could put opposite of Myles Garrett and people will actually like have to make a decision on where they're going to pay attention to. It don't matter who's across from Myles Garrett. Myles is going to get the attention. That's just what it's going to be. I'll live with everything else. I'm not going to live with Myles as being one-on-one, because that's how offensive coordinators are going to think about this. But where it's going to help Myles is that he doesn't have to create every pressure in order to get a sack. He doesn't have to be the driving force in collapsing the pocket in order to make a play, right? He can rely on, okay, I'm not going to get there because they're double teaming and triple teaming me, so I can hold my ground here. But then, you know, maybe Ogbo, maybe Zadarius collapse the pocket. The quarterback has to roll out, and that creates a new lane for me to get there, right? That's where it's going to be helpful. They're always going to double team, triple team, and have the focus of their protection be on where's 95, right? They'll do the mic point. They'll figure out where Myles Garrett's at. And they'll slide to that direction, no matter where you put him. But still having other guys there that can create pressure creates more situations where Myles can get a playoff, or Myles doesn't have to be the only one that can make a play, or we're not just hoping, hey, Myles breaks the defense, because you have other guys in there who can assist and create more havoc that can benefit Myles Garrett. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the benefit for Myles with these new guys here, especially with Zadarius, because Myles has had other guys who have had double-digit sacks opposite of him. You know, Jadeveon Clowney first year, and I believe Olivier Vernon once the year that Myles got suspended. But he's never really had somebody who can get the same amount of pressures per play that he can get. And he's met his equal when it comes to pressures in Zadarius Smith.
The other thing is you don't feel as much pressure to play him every series. If he needs a series to get his breath back, you can do that. Let's take it this way. So we know that Jim Schwartz wants to get upfield and get in the backfield. How do you think the Browns defense under Schwartz does against quarterbacks like a Joe Burrow, like a Lamar Jackson?
It's going to be interesting to see how aggressive he's willing to push it with those two guys, because I would argue with Lamar Jackson, it's not worth the gamble. It's never been worth the gamble to go hardcore at blitzing him unless like he's injured. He's clearly shown that he can't run as well as he can. But if he's at full strength, I don't ever think there's a benefit of going full-blown blitz at Lamar Jackson, because that's where he's best as a passer, and that's where he can absolutely kill you on the run. So I hope that they're tactful about when they're going to be aggressive. With Joe Burrow, there's a mixed bag of evidence there, right? There are the times where teams have blitzed Joe Burrow and it's been a disaster for those defenses, and Joe Burrow has really carved them up. But the few times the Browns have gotten blitz heavy in the last 3 years under Joe Woods was against the Cincinnati Bengals, and they had tremendous success with them, given that Joe Burrow has only won one game in his career versus the Cleveland Browns. So that is an interesting thought to think about, like, hey, how's Jim Schwartz going to do this? Is he going to just go all out no matter what? Is he going to be a little bit more tactful? And then how does that affect you against guys like Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, who are not like Joe Burrow's not the greatest athlete in the world, but he's still fairly mobile. Lamar Jackson is probably one of the best athletes in the world. So you do have to be really concerned about that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, if you're aggressive, you're aggressive, and you have to have, people in place. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, one of your safeties, who kind of makes sure he doesn't get crazy. All right, this is from Yard Barker. 3 reasons the Browns will win the AFC North. A full season of Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb, the running back, and Myles Garrett, and finally company. So, again, all 3 of those. And, again, if Deshaun Watson doesn't have to be back to 2020 Deshaun Watson, if Deshaun Watson's a top 10 quarterback, Quincy, this team's dangerous. They're just flat out dangerous.
It's been the case for like the last 4 years with this team. Hey, once they get a quarterback, or once that quarterback steps up, they're going to be really good. And the 1 year we did have good quarterback play, they were 11-5. Like, the math is pretty easy on this with the Browns. We know that Myles Garrett's good. We know that Nick Chubb's good. We know that Denzel Ward's good. We know that all the other pieces on this team are really good. What has not been consistent and consistently good and playing at a high level is the quarterback position. Whether it be Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, or the last 6 games after a 700-day hiatus from Deshaun Watson, that's been what's held this team back. So if they get consistent quarterback play, and you talk about a team that's been – the Browns have been a quarterback away for so long, people don't talk about us as a team that's a quarterback away. Like, it's so weird. We've been that for like 4 years. We're like, hey, they get it right at quarterback. And I guess people just got tired of bringing it up. But it's still the case, right?
40.
If Deshaun Watson is right at quarterback, then this team, like, they're obviously going to be very good, because there's no other guessing that we're doing around the position. And even if we were guessing, we're not, because 2020 did happen with this same core of guys. We know they're good. We know they can play high-level football.
The franchise record for passing yards and passing touchdowns was set in the 80s. Let that sink in and think of how the NFL has changed since 1980. Quincy Carrier and
Shout out to Brian Sight, 4,000 yards in the early 80s, late 70s, baby.
Yeah,
dog, that's crazy. They used to throw for like 2K,
right? You're right. Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out on the side of the break. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, how you doing? This is the Cardiac Kid. I got 2 quick questions. One, can you tell the history of the Browns without Baker? How important is Baker to the entire Browns history? I don't know. I just want to throw that out there. But more so, second question is the one I really wanted to get to. I've heard multiple analysts over the years say that all championships aren't equal. You know, different championships weigh differently. If Deshaun is to win one with the Browns, what would a single championship do for his legacy? Of course, him being a Super Bowl winning quarterback is a high accomplishment and put him into a class with a couple of different people. But what does him winning one with the Browns, like, where would that single championship rank among others? You guys catch my drift. Appreciate y'all taking my question. Have a nice day. Go Dawg.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Quincy, I mean, Baker Mayfield ended a playoff drought, but he's going to go down as a number one overall guy that didn't live up to being number one overall. And, you know, the number of quarterbacks that have won a Super Bowl, it's pretty small. So you get one of those, and you're an elite company. You get one with the Browns, which is an original that hadn't been there, it does mean more.
Yeah, I would agree with most of that. With Baker Mayfield, he lived somewhere between like Derek Anderson, and what Brian Sipe in the pantheon of quarterbacks. Like he's somewhere in between there. He didn't get to like an AFC Championship game or win an MVP or anything like that. But you know, he was a number one overall pick. It was kind of fun while it lasted. Right, like I think there's Hall of Fame and there's awards for excellence, but sometimes it just needs to be an award for fun, and that's what Baker Mayfield was. He was kind of fun while he was here, right? Kind of hectic, kind of crazy, definitely problematic at times, but like you know, it was fun. It was fun for a couple of years. That's what it was with Baker when it comes to his legacy in Cleveland. And we'll probably, you know, give him the whole treatment in like 20 years once he retires and stops writing letters. And we'll bring him back and we'll all cheer. Remember the good couple of seasons or like good 18 games that he had with this team and act like none of the rest happened. But what would a Super Bowl do for the legacy of Deshaun Watson? Like what? It kind of matters how it happens, right? If this is like Nick Chubb's having one of the greatest rushing exhibitions in NFL history in the playoffs, right the year after like Jim Brown dies in the Cleveland Browns uniform, I think the focus is kind of going to be on like a Nick Chubb, or that's just an example of how the focus could shift off the quarterback when it comes to a championship. But if he does win one here and it's obvious that it's him that's bringing the championship here, that's going to do a ton for his legacy. I think because of everything else that's going on in his life, he probably needs two for people to just be like, all right, he's a legend. And I think that's the case for most quarterbacks, right? Matt Stafford won a Super Bowl, but like we don't talk about Matt Stafford with like this high esteem. We talk about Matt Stafford like Matt Stafford. But if Matt Stafford would have won 2 Super Bowls, all of a sudden it changes. It's the same reason we got to act like Eli was really good, right? Like it's like, oh, he won 2 though. Like he won 2. After you win 2, it changes how we talk about you. Same thing with Pat Mahomes. The second Pat Mahomes won 2. Now we talking about him like Jordan, like we should have the other years, because you know his worst year is 26 touchdowns or 27 touchdowns and 5 interceptions made in 14 games. That's his worst season. That's what Pat Mahomes' worst year looks like. 4,000 yards, by the way. That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah. Again, I know you've done this on your show. How long do you think Deshaun Watson stays in Cleveland? How long is this runway, if you will, with him?
You know, I think a lot of people put this on everything other than like what is actually going to be decided on. And this is going to be decided on a couple things. Like, what's the relationship with him and management? Are they bringing in guys and making him feel like he has a chance to compete? Because that's what drove him out of Houston at the end of the day, was that he did not feel like Houston was doing what they needed to do to make sure that he can compete every year. So as long as the Browns do that and show him the plan and keep him involved, and it's a plan that he agrees with, they'll probably have him for the rest of his career. He does not seem like somebody who wants to bounce around. And I know we prescribe this with athletes of a certain like namesake. After a while, they all want to go to New York or LA or like a big city. But with football players, it's really not like true. I don't know why that stereotype exists for football players. And 2, this is a dude who grew up in Georgia and played in Clemson, South Carolina for 4 years. I feel like Cleveland might be more city than he's ever had when it comes to direct cities he's played football in. So I don't know if this is somebody who's thirsting for the big city or anything like that, where that's going to be a factor. I think it's strictly going to be about football with Deshaun Watson. Does he feel like this is the best place? This is a place that he can hang his hat to, that gives him a chance to win football games every year. And as long as that's past a certain point with him, I think it'll be fine. I think he'll stay.
And the thing is, the Browns have been looking for a quarterback that they feel is a franchise quarterback for so long. If he shows signs of that, they're going to try to extend him forever.
It ain't going to come down to money, right?
No.
Like,
yeah. No.
I wonder what his extension going to look like, right? Because you kind of got to do what you did plus already. Like, I wonder how they handled the extension of him without the leverage that they had. Without the lack of leverage that they had.
You might not have to. You might be surprised because of what you just said. You're going to want to be able to put pieces around him, and I think you're going to see some of that coming up. But yeah, we'll see. Browns offense is going to look different. How do you think it looks different? How much different? How does it look this year?
Well, it's going to look different, but I think we talk about it in uncertain terms when we say it's going to look different, right? Where we're like, hey, we're going to throw more, we're going to, and in some people's minds, this gets to, oh my goodness, we're never going to use Nick Chubb again. I did the numbers on like, okay, even if we throw a little bit more, right? And let's say Deshaun Watson gets 600 passing attempts, which will put him at the top 10 of the league, right? That's much more. That's about 20 more attempts than they had last year. You average that out per game, we're talking about him just getting like 5 more passing dropbacks, and then you would take the rest of those dropbacks from like running back 2 or miscellaneous attempts where somebody else is running the ball. And at the end of the day, the offense is going to be different, but it's not going to be unrecognizable. You know, like Nick Chubb is still going to get 15 to 17 carries a game. Deshaun Watson is not going to throw the ball 53 times a game, but he will throw the ball 40 times. It will be a slight increase, right? The changes will be more in passing concepts and what they do in certain situations, but I don't think it's going to be a radical change on like what you see at the baseline every Sunday. Because if you don't think Nick Chubb's going to be important, he will. He will be I would argue, more important than he's ever been, because he's always been been used as one part of a duo. Now we're going to be relying on Nick Chubb as Nick Chubb and Nick Chubb alone. So I feel like he's more important in this offense now because we're not leaning with the Kareem Hunt crutch behind us. So, yeah, I think this offense in some ways is going to feel a little bit different in some areas. But ultimately, at the big picture, it's not going to be a drastic change. It will be a change, but I don't think it's going to be a radical change. And we're going to see like Nick Chubb be 20th in carries and Deshaun Watson be like number 1 in passing attempts. And if that's the case, I feel like something went wrong on defense.
They're going to throw the ball early, and they're going to they're not going to be afraid to throw the ball when they think it's most advantageous. There's going to be a lot of freedom that Deshaun Watson has that the 2 quarterbacks that we've had before, Baker Mayfield and Jacoby Brissett, didn't. I think that's kind of what this offense is going to be.
Yeah, the difference will be on 3rd and 1, instead of feeling like we have to run, we could do both. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, that will be the big difference, where in these situations we felt like we were held or handcuffed to running the football, now you can have an option where you feel like you got the same level of success.
Quincy, Carrier, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. He'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, guys. Dan in Maryland again. I just wanted to say I appreciate you doing some of the recent pieces you've done, pointing out that David Bell was not quite the bust last year that some people want to make him out to be for some reason. I frankly find the notion of the Browns cutting him to be comical, bordering on ridiculous. I realize this is a kid who does not test off the charts athletically, but let's remember that mock drafts had him going in the second round. A few had him slipping into the first round. I realize he didn't, catch a lot of balls his rookie year. We can debate why all day long, but this is still a good, talented receiver who knows how to catch the ball. And the fact is, very possible that this time next year, Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and Marquise Goodwin are all going to be gone from the team. At the very least, two of the three will probably be gone from the team. And so while we may not need him much this year, I think he very much factors into the Browns' plans for the future, particularly the next couple of years after this year when he's still on a cheap rookie deal, and the Browns have to start making some tough choices with regard to their salary cap. Anyhow, keep up the good work and go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Quincy, it is a crowded wide receiver room, but David Bell wasn't healthy and kind of fell behind and could never quite get ahead of where he was. I don't think he's getting cut unless, he would. Remember we were talking about how he doesn't drop anything. That was the big thing about him throughout training camp. You were counting, I think he had like 2 drops all of training camp. But it is a crowded wide receiver room. I will say that.
Yeah, it's a crowded room, but this is also a franchise that doesn't cut a lot of the draft picks. That's been one of the criticisms I feel like some people have used against Andrew Berry, is that he doesn't cut enough of his draft picks. So why would he cut a 3rd-round pick from last year when he has not cut a 3rd-round pick from 2020 yet? You know what I mean? It doesn't make much sense to me why he would do that. I think David Bell's clearly going to stay with this team. And his future is not right now, for this team. I think his future is for a couple of years with this team. And for whatever reason, if the needle isn't pointing like sky high up with the rookie at the end of year 1, people tend to just be real easy to give up on him, which is interesting, right? Because we're all excited about Elijah Moore. And I don't think we should not be excited about Elijah Moore. I think we should be excited about Elijah Moore. But if Elijah Moore was drafted in Cleveland and put up the numbers that he did the last 2 years here, we would be talking about Elijah Moore like he David Bell. Not because he's not impressive or has an upside, but because we just get this stigma whenever somebody doesn't have 1,000 yards within their first couple of years of playing football, that they're not going to be what they are. So we kind of understand this concept when it comes to Elijah Moore on why, hey, you give a guy a right situation, the right situation comes along, he will be fine and develop in that way. We should probably have that same leeway for somebody like David Bell. Yeah,
and I've heard that criticism of Andrew Berry that, they don't cut their draft picks. There's something to be said for, I respect our evaluation of players. We evaluate, if you evaluate players to be good, then you have to give them time to develop to be what you saw in them.
Yeah, look, I'll always remember the Browns drafted a dude named Vince Mailey in the 4th round one year and cut him in training camp. And that's when I knew the team was never going to be good that year, because that's just dysfunctional, right? This is a far cry from dysfunction. Whether you like that they're so patient with these players or not, whether you like that they give them a chance to develop or not, we would also be crying if we cut one of these dudes in year 2 like we have before, and then they develop into somebody oh, why did we give up on them, right? So if you draft them, if you believe in a player enough to draft them, especially within the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, you owe it to yourself and that player to see it out as long as you can for it to make sense.
All right. I know you've also had this on your show as well. Players that fans have given up on, but that the Browns have not.
Yeah, Jerome Ford is one on this list. And people won't admit, they're like, I haven't given up on Jerome Ford. But then you ask them, hey, should we sign Ezekiel Elliott? Should we sign Dalvin Cook? And they're like, well, yeah. Yeah, because you don't believe in Jerome Ford, right? Because for whatever reason, people act like they're scared to death for Jerome Ford to have not even a significant role on this team, but just a role on this team. So I feel like that's somebody that we just and that's the one that makes the least sense to me, because I have a guy like Jordan Elliott on this list, who I don't think the Browns have given up on yet. But I can understand why Browns fans would have given up on Jordan Elliott. I can understand why Browns fans would have given up on Harrison Bryant. While I have not given up on Perion Winfrey, I know why some Browns fans would give up on Perion Winfrey, Anthony Schwartz, and even Jacob Phillips to an extent. But Jerome Ford and David Bell are in that category of players, yo, people just gave up on them because it's not their rookie year no more. Like, it doesn't make much sense to me.
See our previous conversation. You gotta, if you believe in a guy enough to draft him, out of how many ever people you could have drafted, you got to give the coaches time to develop them. And then at some point, you have to realize, well, this just isn't going to work out. But if you do that too quickly, you run the risk like you were talking about. This is interesting. You're going to love this one. Pro Football Focus. NFL's best duos at every position. Tight end, David Njoku and Jordan Akins. Both Njoku and newcomer Akins coming off careers 2022 together. The duo should give Deshaun Watson a multitude of options to work with to help the Browns return to the playoffs in 2023. Who's Travis Kelce's backup? That's good. That's like like Jim
Brown's the duo
backup.
I want. And no disrespect to David Njoku and Jordan Akins. I feel like they're gonna have good years this year. I think they're both gonna have career years. They're gonna ball. But the combination I want is Travis and Kelce. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Who's Mark Andrews' backup? I'm pretty sure you can say that could be the best duo. The thing is, like with tight ends, we don't talk about them as duos because you don't often see teams out here like relying on two tight ends to win football games. Because a wide receiver duo would be a little bit more deadly. But hey, maybe that helps in the red zone. Jordan Akins and David Njoku being the best tight end duo, and I might have to get a shirt with that on it. You know what I mean? Like I gotta rock that.
Isaiah Likely is Mark Andrews' backup, by the way. I know the answer to that one. All right.
Oh, wow, that's such a better duo. Like no disrespect.
All right. Now, there's another one, though. This one is going to be hard to argue with. Offensive guards, they say Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller. Bitonio's usual dominant self in 2022, finishing second with a 87.5 PFF grade, finishing both pass blocking and run blocking grades over 80. Past season wasn't the usual dominant one for Teller. However, finished 18th among guards PFF with a 70.3 grade. And Teller, in fairness, had a calf injury, and I can't imagine trying to move a big body around because you can't push off if you've got a calf injury. Be that as it may.
Most importantly,
yeah,
you know how hard it is to stick your foot down an anchor? Like,
yeah,
when your calf hurt? That's got to be painful. I would imagine that affected him tremendously. But we'll see. Hopefully he's back to his usual self this year, and we're going to need him to be in order for the Browns to be successful. But yes, that is an actual, like, okay, yeah, it's a great duo. They're on the field at the same time. They work in tandem at times. The Browns pull them. That's a duo. Tight end duos, I don't know if that's actually a thing.
Quincy, Kara, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Obo Okinrankwo. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Obo Okinrankwo talked about his goals with the Browns this season. This from the best podcast available.
My short-term goals are just for weight goals, body comp goals, and then team bonding goals, just to be able to hang out with the guys, away from the facility for about a couple days, My long-term goals, we all play for the same reason, I don't have to say, but we're working to build something special in that building.
And Quincy, the fact that he is in theory your third edge rusher, I like it. Jim Short's going to keep waving those guys in.
I like to think of him as like a relief pitcher. You know what I mean? Like he's a specialty guy. Like, okay, we got this guy. We're going to bring in him for here, or we're going to try to slide him outside of Miles. So it's going to be real interesting, not necessarily during camp, because I don't think they're going to reveal it during camp, but during the season where we see Ugbo line up and the many different ways that they decide to use him. They could use him as an edge. They could use him as a stand-up linebacker who's going to come down to blitz or maybe stay in coverage sometimes. There's a lot of like flexibility with what you can use him with and the different combinations of guys you can use him with if they're going to come, if they're not. And I think that that's going to be very intriguing to watch as we get more and more film during the year.
Yeah, I agree. And, good luck figuring out where those guys are going to drop, who's going to come. And Jim Schwartz will mix it up. I guarantee that. All right, this is from Pro Football Focus as well. Top 10 offensive and defensive defensive line rankings. So PFF has the Browns offensive and defensive lines both in the top 10 in the NFL. Eagles, obviously, there as well, and the Cowboys. So there you have it. We've kind of been skirting around it. PFF ranks the Browns top 10 defensive line.
That's a testament to the talent on this team, because that defensive line last year, not because of the talent, was awful. Outside of Myles Garrett, I think Jake Burns has the best line. I've heard of it. He was Mike Trout in a minor league lineup. That's what it was. That's the one I go with to describe what happened there last year.
Yeah, and look at the numbers he put up with that. Think about that. This is from Warren Sharp Football. First half points scored in 2022. Eagles, number 1, 296. That's seventh most in NFL history. Chiefs, number 2. The two teams that played in the Super Bowl, by the way. Bills, number 3. The Browns, down at 22, scored 100 points less than the Chiefs and 130-some less than the Eagles. What that means is you're playing from behind a whole lot, and that is never a good thing. But I would expect that to change pretty dramatically.
Well, and it's like look at the style of football between the teams that are in top 3 and where the Browns were for most of the year, right? The Browns were just run heavy. We'll throw it every once in a while with Jacoby Brissett, take some chances here or there. And the way that the Browns scored the football was really long. Like, I would love to see the correlation between first half points and time of possession, right? Because the Browns were a heavy time of possession team, and they really only would have 6 to 8 possessions a game. So that's not going to lead you a ton of space to score. But you look at the teams with a lot of first half points. Eagles, explosive passing offense, right? You got A.J. Smith, Devonta Smith, all those dudes out there with Jalen Hurts throwing the football. Kansas City Chiefs, do I even have to say it? In the Buffalo Bills, that also goes without being said. So now the Browns have more of a chance to be that kind of offense because they've upgraded their weapons in the receiving room, and they've also, they're expecting Deshaun Watson to be closer to that than not.
Yeah, without question. And we did something yesterday. The Browns were top 5. They were 5th in time of possession a season ago. All right, active spending. This takes into account money that's rolled over from the previous year's cap and excludes dead cap money. This is from overthecap.com. Browns, number 1 in active spending, and you see $217.7 million. That's about $1.5 million ahead of the Bills. Broncos are 3rd. Chiefs 4th. Chargers 5th. The Bengals are 6th. And remember, they've got Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow coming up that they are going to have to pay money to as well. But bottom line is Browns are spending a lot of money.
Oh, they're spending Marvel movie money. Like, that's the budget for one of the Marvel movies. No, it's more, right?
Right.
Oh no, the budget for Marvel movies is like $300 million. So they out here spending $288. Think about that. Every time you watch football on Sunday, those are two teams throwing about $500 million out there on the field to play against each other, and that doesn't even include all the money that goes into production around the game. The Browns are very expensive. They're expensive because they expect to win. We'll see what happens, but if they do, and this is their best bet to do it, because again, we've talked about this at the top of the show, the Browns' issues have been at the consistency with quarterback play. Part of the reason you're spending that much money, and I think a significant chunk of the $217 million probably had something to do with Deshaun Watson and Myles Garrett. Well, the reason you're doing that is because not Myles Garrett, but Deshaun Watson is the answer to that problem, right? You're a quarterback away, get the quarterback. If he's the quarterback, hey, ceiling is the roof. But if he's not, then we're doing the same thing we did in 2019. We're doing the same thing we did in 2018. We're doing the same thing we did in 2021, where we're worrying about, oh, well, what we're going to have to do to put it around him. We want that that question to be answered. Deshaun Watson is supposed to be one of the answers to that question. So if he can answer that question, it ain't going to matter what this money being spent, because that's what the money's for, right? You look at the Bills, the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Bengals. Those are all teams that felt like at some point they took a big swing to get their quarterback. The Broncos, it feels like a whiff, but everybody else took a big swing there. It's not a coincidence that each one of those teams is a quarterback that you could recognize on them. And that's because quarterbacks are expensive, because they are the answer to a lot of different problems.
Yeah, you're right. So it's Watson, Allen, Russell Wilson, Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Joe Burrow. 5 and 6 still haven't paid their quarterback yet. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, because they are up against it.
Having a quarterback, like a lot of people in their mid-20s learn, is like having a partner. It's expensive, but it is worth it. It's just more expensive. You got to make a little bit more money than you thought you needed to, right? You know what I mean? Even if y'all not all the way to the point where you're sharing assets, you still got to pay for stuff to do. And that's what the Bengals and the Chargers are doing. They got to pay for dates. They got to make sure that Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert don't leave. Like, that's what they're doing. So now, it costs about the same, dog. Whether you pay them or not, it's costing about the same to keep them. And you rather have them than not, right?
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
No problem.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Really good stuff. Untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage, always good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Jackson McCurry from the DawgLand and Top Dog podcast straight ahead. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Obo Okunrankwo talked about why he chose the Browns in free agency. This from the best podcast available.
Just all the young talent on this team, from top to bottom, this roster's stacked, offense, defense. I just saw a great opportunity, also being able to just play with, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. It just on paper, it looked amazing playing on the opposite side of Myles Garrett. It was too good of an offer to pass.
What's it been like so far with Myles? I know that he's been here for a little bit on and off, but your interactions with him.
Oh, he's a super cool guy, he loves the game. He's probably somewhere training right now. The guy, he's a freak of nature. He can do a lot of stuff that I'll never be able to do. Don't
say that. I don't know about that.
I'm really excited to play alongside him. He's a really cool dude. Ready to learn a lot from him.
What about Jim Schwartz? What stands out so far through the offseason program?
His energy. He's the same guy every day. He loves the game. He wants us to play with our hair on fire. He's gonna allow us to. He literally told us to take the seatbelt off and go play football. So that's fun.
Well, let's welcome in Jackson McCurry from the DawgLand and Top Dogs podcast. Jackson, Okoronkwo is one of the guys I'm really anxious to see how Jim Schwartz uses because of his versatility.
Yeah, me too. He was my favorite acquisition during the free agency process, and I thought he was going to be a nice number 2 alongside Myles Garrett. Now you're looking at him as a number 3 alongside Myles and Zadarius Smith. So it gives you more, like you said, versatility, more flexibility on that defensive line to where you can rotate guys in and out. But, I mean, he said all the right things. The Browns look like a great team on paper. He gets to play alongside Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith, gets to play under a great coach in Jim Schwartz. I'm really anxious to see what Okoronkwo can do this coming season and for the next couple of years with the Browns defense.
The other thing is I think some fans are concerned that, he's not going to be playing as many snaps. On the defensive line, if you can stay fresher and healthier, the offensive line they're not going to be subbing in. So, that half step is going to makes a difference late in the third quarter and in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've seen teams like Philadelphia and other defenses that have had multiple options on the defensive line and be able to rotate guys in and out. I think that's what helps make these defenses great, especially late in the season and into the postseason, is that you're be able to keep guys fresh. We've talked about it for years since Myles Garrett got drafted. He's played a lot of snaps. Now he's going to be able to be fresh, like you said, late in the third quarter, into the fourth quarter, and those crucial moments in the game where we need him to make an impact play. He's going to be fresh enough to do so. And not only him, but Zadarius Smith and even Okoronkwo as well.
All right, this from NFL.com. Top 10 disruptors in 2022. Number 1 was Micah Parsons. Number 2 was Nick Bosa. Number 3, Myles Garrett. 72 pressures. The QB pressure rate, 16.3. Hurries, 48. Sacks, 16. Turnovers caused by pressure, 3. Now, that was a top 10 list. Just outside the top 10 was Zadarius Smith. And I would argue that Okoronkwo and Smith and Tomlinson are going to help Myles Garrett even ascend. I mean, he's been great, but I think those guys are going to make him even that much more dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the guys that were above Myles. Micah Parsons had DeMarcus Lawrence, some other pieces on that Cowboys defensive front. Nick Bosa had a ton of guys alongside him in San Francisco on the defensive line. Myles hasn't had that help over the last couple of years. You could even make the case in Pittsburgh with TJ Watt. He's had Cam Hayward, he's had Alex Highsmith, he's had other guys around him. Myles really hasn't had that. He had Jadeveon Clowney for a season, he had Olivier Vernon for a season. He really hasn't had that steady sidekick on the defensive line. Now he potentially has that with Zadarius Smith. He's going to have that with Okoronkwo for the next couple years, and hopefully Dalvin Tomlinson, and you hope Isaiah McGuire or Alex Wright emerges as well here in the coming years. So Myles has the supporting cast now, and the fact that defenses or offenses are not going to be able to double team him as much because of his supporting cast, I think we might see the best out of Myles Garrett come later this year.
Yeah, and I think Jim Schwartz has that in mind with what he's going to do game to game as well. Is kind of how can I unleash Myles Garrett at the exact time to make the offense pay. All right, before we go to break, this is from the Rich Eisen Show. Rich Eisen, most overlooked make or break players in the NFL in 2023.
Deshaun Watson. Because he's got a show. Last year was just because he was rusty. All right. He's got a show.
Yeah.
That the reason why the Browns went out there and took all the heat was because of his supreme talent. And he's got to show out and ball out. Because if he doesn't Could you imagine if he has another full year like the few weeks that he had last year? Oh, man. Will that just make life miserable for all of the Browns? He might even get his coach got if that happens. Fact. So this is a huge make or break season for him and the Browns, because we are focused appropriately on Burrow and we are focused appropriately on Lamar Jackson. And you mentioned Kenny Pickett, who was originally on my list, but I replaced him with Sam Howell because nobody's talking about the Washington Commanders.
I think
but Deshaun Watson's on this list,
I think
man.
they're going to be good.
That's what you're thinking. And if they're not, look out below, man.
You could say that about, probably 8 of the 32 NFL teams. I won't argue that, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as much as the trade was franchise altering, like Rich Eisen said, if Deshaun Watson falls flat on his face and does not perform up to our expectations, that could be franchise altering in itself, because he said, like, Stefanski could be out the door. Andrew Berry could be out the door. Guys might want to leave if the Browns just fall flat and be a big disappointment in 2023. But I agree with Rich Eisen's producer. I think the Browns are going to be good. I think, there's some expectations locally, but nationally, everybody's trying to push the Browns down. And I think that's going to motivate everybody in that locker room. And, when the doubt kind of sets in nationally, is usually when the Browns kind of show up. Usually when there's expectations, the Browns tend to fall flat on their face. The fact that they're being overlooked nationally, I think bodes well for the Browns going into 2023, because I think that whole locker room will say, everybody's doubting us. Let's go shock the world again like they did in 2020. And we'll see what actually happens, though.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would be surprised if Deshaun Watson doesn't play well and if the Browns do not make a run at the playoffs. I've been surprised before, but I feel pretty good about this season. Jackson McCurry and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout, other side of the break. Albert Breer on the state of the Browns. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jackson McCurry from the DawgLand and Top Dogs podcast. Albert Breer talked about the state of the Browns after their off-season moves. This was from 92.3 The Fan's Afternoon Drive.
I sort of look at like where they're at, as I think a continuation of the way that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have built over the last 3 years now. That doesn't mean people's jobs aren't on the line. If they have a bad year with Deshaun Watson there and what they're giving Deshaun Watson, and what they've built around him, I certainly think like the shine of 2020 is worn off enough, like where like it certainly would be in everybody's jobs on the line type of year. But I don't know that they've really done anything that's like, God, that's going to be a tough one for the next regime to clean up. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see it that way. Like, I think they've been relatively measured in the way that they built, which is consistent with how they built over the first 3 years those guys were there.
And really, Jackson, it's the sign of a well-run franchise, that you haven't done anything that you go out and you get your quarterback because you need a quarterback. But other than that, they haven't done anything that that kind of holds them into something long-term that they don't want to be held to.
Right. I mean, Barry has done a great job of the way he structured the contracts and maintained the cap flexibility. So if something were to happen where, Jimmy and Dee hasn't decided to make a change in management or at coaching, there's nothing, the cupboard's not bare there. You have the quarterback in place for the next several years. You have your cornerstone franchise players and Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. There's parts that are replaceable. They can tweak some things and move some guys out, move some guys in. So the cupboard's not bare. This team is very talented. You just have to go out and execute this year. And if they don't, I would expect changes are made, not only in management and coaching, but perhaps on the roster as well. But yeah, there's key pieces in place here. You just kind of have to fill the correct puzzle pieces in for this team to take the next step forward.
Yeah, and I mean that's the way the NFL operates. If Browns expect to be a playoff team, if there are changes. That's people that sign up to be coaches and general managers and players in the NFL understand that. Dog Pound Daily, 3 players who could be one and done with the Browns in 2023. Wide receiver, Marquise Goodwin. Number 2, safety, Rodney McLeod. And number 1, they say Zadarius Smith. Not a tight end, but a defensive end. So they got the wrong position there. Those are all guys that are over 30. So after you get past 30, it is a year-to-year proposition in the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. And when you have such a top-heavy roster like the Browns do, you're going to have guys that are going to come in and out on one-year deals. So you've seen that the last couple of years, the Malik Jacksons of the world, the Jadeveon Clowneys of the world. But now you look, those 3 guys mentioned. Zadarius Smith goes out and has another monster year. He's probably going to get paid by somebody not named the Cleveland Browns next year in free agency. Rodney McLeod, he's heading towards the end of his career. Same with Marquise Goodwin. Those guys were luxury signings at the certain points in free agency that the Browns did sign them. So they're good veteran leadership guys that are on the end of their career just coming in, but they can still play. They can still be productive. But I don't disagree with anybody on that list. I would expect most of them to be one and dones. You might get one of them to come back on another one-year deal in 2024, but I would tend to think Goodwin and McLeod are those guys. I just think if Zadarius Smith has a productive year, he's going to get paid by another team in free agency next year.
The other thing that will happen if Deshaun Watson plays like he is capable of playing, you'll get veterans that will want to come here on one-year deals, that aren't money-breaking contracts because they'll see the opportunity to play and compete for a title.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if DeAndre Hopkins had decided to come to Cleveland to play with Deshaun Watson, I don't think it would have been for the money. He probably would have taken less, looking at what was in the wide receiver room, looking at the Browns' financial situation. But like you said, other guys, they might want to take less if Deshaun Watson shows that elite level that he did in his Houston days. If he gets back to that form, I don't disagree with you. I think guys will take less money to come to Cleveland and have the opportunity to A, play with Watson, and B, potentially win a Super Bowl.
All right, this is from Next Gen Stats. Rush yards over expected. These are the leaders since 2018. So rush yards over expected uses field position, defensive alignment, player tracking data to determine how many more yards a rusher gained than we'd expect an average rusher to gain in the same situation. Number 1, Nick Chubb with over 1,300 yards. That's almost 300 yards more than Derrick Henry. Almost twice as many yards as Jonathan Taylor. Saquon Barkley was 4th. Aaron Jones was 5th. I guess what we're saying, Jackson, is this Nick Chubb running back is pretty good.
Yeah, and he still, I think, gets underlooked by a lot of the national media just to how dominant he's been. And he's been with average to below average quarterbacks for the majority of his career. Now he's with an elite quarterback. And I think, if Deshaun gets back to form, Nick Chubb's going to get even more open looks. And I think that number will climb even higher this year. I think we're going to see the best out of Nick Chubb this year. I think, and that's crazy because he's already had a 1,500-yard season. He's already eclipsed 6,000 yards in his first 5 years of his career. But I still think, and he is getting older, and running backs seem to slow down. But sometimes when I watch him, I can't help but feel like, what was Adrian Peterson like in years 6, 7, 8 of his NFL career? he seemed to get better. I think he had a 2,000-yard season his like 6th or 7th year in the league. Not saying Nick Chubb's going to have a 2,000-yard season, but I expect Nick Chubb to keep going for these next couple years, and I feel like we might see prime Nick Chubb, which will even be better than what he's already been in his first 5 years.
Yeah, I think to your point, I think Deshaun Watson as the quarterback, if he's playing at an elite level, takes people out of the box, spreads people out. So all of a sudden, Nick Chubb is not running into 8- and 9-man boxes, and that's I think that helps him out without question. Jackson, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Always a pleasure, Dave. Have a good one.
All right, Jackson McCurry, make sure you check him out. The DawgLand and Top Dogs podcast. Always really good stuff. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.